Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at Poetry Attack. I hope you and yours are well and thriving wherever you are. I'm Travis Denton. I have the joy and privilege to serve as the Associate Director of Poetry Attack. I'd like to welcome all our local, national, and international friends, of which we have many joining us tonight. Welcome to your poetry home here at Georgia Tech. We're glad you're here. We've got a great night of poetry ahead of us as we welcome Martín Espada, Jasmine Elizabeth Smith, and Bruce McEver. And in a few minutes, we'll be presenting the Fall 2021 winner of the Thomas Lux Poetry Award. That's all coming up, but let's begin with gratitude. Such a great way to begin. Poetry Attack was created around the year 2000 when, unbeknownst to one another, Bruce McEver and Margaret and Henry Seaborn each made gifts that started this thing we call Poetry Attack, and we've been going strong since then, having brought at least 400 poets to Georgia Tech, and not to mention a huge number of free community workshops and other community outreach programs. I'm happy to continue that tradition tonight with my partner in crime, Ilya Kaminsky. Ilya is going to be up in just a few minutes to introduce our poets. Tonight's also the book launch for Jasmine Elizabeth Smith's collection, South Flight. Jasmine is the winner of the Georgia Poetry Prize from the University of Georgia Press. Several years ago, we partnered with UGA Press to establish the Georgia Poetry Prize, and each year we alternate between UGA and Poetry at Tech as to who chooses the winning collection. Jasmine's book was selected from hundreds, literally hundreds of submissions. We want to thank our friends Beth Sneed and Lisa Bayer for all the work they do to pull off the publication of the winning collection each year. That's no simple feat. Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Lisa. And thanks to all our friends at UGA Press. Happy to be partners with you. Next, tonight is made even more special by the fact that we're here to introduce our Fall 2021 winner of the Thomas Lux Poetry Prize, a prize that's given to a Poetry at Tech student poet in the fall and spring of each year. The prize is $1,000. That's right, $1,000. And as Tom Lux would say, that's not chump change. And indeed it's not. And we have Cheney Crow to thank for establishing this transformative prize for Georgia Tech students of poetry. Here's more about the prize. Thomas Lux believed that poems are made things, just like bridges, buildings, or airplanes. Each requires planning, editing, revision, and most of all, the capacity on the part of the maker to put in the time and hard work that signifies dedication to craft. And for that reason, the Thomas Lux Poetry Award is meant to acknowledge a Georgia Tech poetry student who exemplifies that dedication to craft through the student's extraordinary interest in studying poetry, its craft and traditions, and through his or her willingness to put in the hard work required toward producing well-wrought poems. In the spirit of Thomas Lux's vision for teaching and writing, this prize, it's meant to reward endeavor, not mastery of forms or overall poetic achievement. It's not a poetry contest. Let's get that clear. An awardee's poetry must present an overall clarity and accessibility, and all ambition should be toward the work itself. We have a winner tonight who exemplifies what this award is all about. The Thomas Lux Poetry Award goes to Cambria Caliendo tonight. Cambria will read one of her poems in just a moment, but let me tell you a little bit more about our winner. Cambria Caliendo is a civil engineering major at Georgia Tech. She'll graduate with her bachelor's in civil engineering in May of 2022, this semester, and will graduate with her master's in environmental engineering in May of 2023. Cambria loves to challenge her poor time management, as she says, her poor time management by baking in excess, spending time with family, telling stories, playing basketball and viola, and of course, writing poetry. Cambria's goal is to help others in any way she can, whether that's through offering her time and being a friend or engineering safe and efficient systems for all communities. Cambria, you want to share one of your poems with us?
Of course. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Professor Denton. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so I'll read one of my poems now. This is a poem that I wrote for fun. I like to really have fun with my poetry, and this one, as you'll see, I definitely did not take myself too seriously with this. So this is called An Overdone Poem About Love, because writing about love is just so tempting. So I hope you all enjoy. Oh, my darling, to know you long enough to be able to share in memory and occasion, like when we indulged in the bubbly giggles of soda, and I put my face close to yours for the first time, and let the bubbles rise back up my throat until I released a boisterous belch right in your glowing summer-felt face. And we shared our laughter at my soda-scented burp, and we shared in our newfound love. Oh, my darling, to be able to look crusty alongside you, to let the radiant redness of the rosacea on my nose shine brighter than some reindeer of lore just for you. And I care not of any blemishes on your face, blooming with youth and its partnering pimple, because the deep brown of your eyes and the goofy smile that quickly matures to a silent gasping laugh cares not whether beauty rains down on us, for a drought of beauty is no drought of love. Oh, my darling, to reach the point with you where I can say, my love, you have a little booger in your nose, and neither of us feel awkward, and maybe I'll try to get it for you, because any sense of shame I could feel with you is now only equal to the shame a baby could feel while being cared for by his mother. For love knows not shame, but a superfluous supply of comfort. Oh, my darling, to bridge our emotions together so that you share in my deepest pains, like when I ate 30 Oreos in an hour and my papier-mâché stomach ripped right down its newspaper-strewn seams. And I only endured those brutal hours on the porcelain throne because you texted me precious puppy pictures and blessed my misery with empathy and company, a company of love to combat life's cramps. Oh, my darling, can we even begin to describe the very thing that makes us human? Oh, how average and unspecial is love, and yet here we are, feeling as if the world revolves around. Thank you all.
That was wonderful. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, and congratulations once again. And looking forward to seeing more of your fantastic poems. And incidentally, you are our 10th winner of the Thomas Sykes Poetry Award tonight. So congratulations. Next up, let's bring in Ilya Kaminsky. Hey, Ilya. Ilya is going to be introducing our poets for tonight. Hey, Ilya, how are you?
Hello, Travis, and thank you so much, and congratulations again, Cambria. And thank you all, friends, for being with us today from so many different places around the country and the world. It's my true pleasure to introduce Bruce McEver tonight. Let me say a few words, but first, it's a poetry reading. So what is a lyric poem? Lyric poem, Edward Hirsch tells us, is a social act of a solitary maker. It gives voice to the unspoken. It chronicles the inner life. I think Bruce McEver would agree. Bruce's poems have appeared in some of the country's best literary journals, including Plowshares and the Atlanta Review. He is the author of the forthcoming memoir called Many Paths, and he has published 3 poetry collections, most recently Like Lesser Gods, published by C&R Press, which the poet Stephen Dobbins has called, quote, a brave book, a book for grown-ups. Former poet laureate of the United States, Billy Collins, has praised the quiet authority of Bruce's work, saying, quote, McEver writes poems with his heart and head, but also with his ear, which is keenly attuned to the soundscapes of English. Allow me to add a few more of my own words to this. The great Russian poet Boris Pasternak says, God of poetry is the great God of detail. It is in the details of the world that the world becomes itself, becomes one with us. I think Bruce McEver believes in this notion as well. In his poem, Many Paths, he writes, quote, morning, below zero the day after she died, my breath freezing, I am daily walking to the barnyard to recall our happenings with the animals there. Pagan saddle gates close behind me, my quarter horse Cinnamon spots me over 100 yards distant and begins his long lope. Soon his soft snuggle is rubbing my face warm than her horse and shoon. The whole herd, joined by the goats and the duck, they ring me in the circle of compassion. Touched, yet unbelieving, I look up into the blinding cold sun and feel a release. An energy courses the length of my body and says again, then again, there are many paths. Nothing has ever been so clear. It is in the attention to details, in desire for clarity of seeing the world around us that spiritual life begins. Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish writes that clarity is our deepest mystery. And Bruce McEver, each thing, McEver says in one of his poems, each thing can become, quote, a mystery whose roosters carry up the morning. Please give him a very warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ilya. Thank you, Travis. And it's an honor to be reading here with Martín and Jasmine. And it's good to be back at Georgia Tech. And thank you for that wonderful introduction, including Pasternak, one of my favorite. This is a poem that I had a birthday. You sort of wonder what my background is, but I had a birthday last week, and this is a poem that I put together in. I'm getting the wrong picture here somehow. This is a poem that I put together from the text that I got from the somehow I don't know if the engineer's here. I'm not seeing myself in the thing. Sorry. Wait.
Able to see you, Bruce. So.
Oh, okay. You can see me.
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry. So this is a poem that I wrote from text. It's called "When I Was Born." There was no air conditioning or TV. We cooled our house with an attic fan, and the entertainment tinted revival meetings. Our parents had survived a big war. Afterwards, they skimped and saved and to put us through school. We rode bikes everywhere. My first operation, ether, dripped into a wire mesh held over my nose. Uncle Fletch had an Indian mound on his farm in North Georgia, where when plowed springs produced potsherds and arrowheads, while Aunt Anna in Nebraska was the sole survivor of an Indian raid stuffed under a cooking kettle. Mostly, I remember not wearing any shoes all summer and the earth feeling so alive. I've become a snowbird now, but I've always really delighted in the observation of nature. And what I love down here in Florida are the birds. And this is a particularly stout trooper This is called Ode to Pelican. I love these birds. They look like flying dinosaurs, survivors of the Jurassic extinction. They soar, wingman to wingman in formation over the channel, where this morning a bay breeze diffuses sunrise over shallow waves. Ancient hunters, the flight soon spots its prey, and like dive bombers, they plunge to stun the fish and then scoop them up with their yellow pouches. Head first, they swallow them down. The only species to so stun their victims, they're off again for another run, working together over the entire span of the channel between the houses on the canal banks. Evolution's lab gave them an impact-resistant skull and membrane eye coverings to survive their high dive act. They follow the fish schools in and out with the morning tide, as they have practiced before this development of dredged rock, shells, and mud clawed into their mangrove swamps, forcing their rookeries further south. They are older than we, and in them the world rebalances. We can learn something from these animals and how they've survived and how they're forced to survive by us. I was going to read something about the pandemic, but I think it's a little long, so I'm going to skip to our reaction and our neighbors' reaction to the pandemic right when it began. The government sort of really banned anything that was sort of any fun, and so we tried to figure out how to protest in some way, called flattening the curve. It was the time of the quarantine. Governments panicked, ordering social distancing, the law of the land, to flatten the scourge of the stricken. A strange virus from China had flown with bats out of Mongolian caves, and jet spread its curse around the world. Here, police cordoned off park benches and beaches like crime scenes with yellow tape. We soon rebelled, as did our neighbors, who came out quiet at sunsets, like the ancients gathered at the Stonehenge to pay their respects to the waning day, observing the orange orb sink into the placid gulf, feeling in its absence a new presence, watching close as slack waves lapped the forbidden sandy shore, and dared to read poetry. Sort of came up with poetry readings as cocktail hour on the beach. Anyway, this is, I live, as many of you know, in Salisbury, Connecticut during the summers and in springs. And this is from the Berkshires. This combines a little bit of science and nature and maybe a touch of religion. Called This Morning in the Berkshires. This morning in the Berkshires at breakfast, I see on the Times front page a dim orange ring staring out like some ethereal eye. It's proof of a black hole, in a far-off galaxy, for the first time photographed. The text explains it was only visible through the intricate synchronization of 11 giant telescopes around the world. These illumination graveyards are thought to center our galaxies, where gravity is so strong, light can't escape. Meanwhile, down here, our planet's past another equinox, and sun-seeking bulbs press up to bud along my stone walls. Outside, the season's change is scented by my farmer neighbor, spreading manure on his fallow fields beneath my house and the river, its stench wafted up by a breeze. An ancient ritual even the Chinese emperor once celebrated behind oxen. My neighbor's plow soon turns the mixture rich with river bottom into furrows of brown ground, neatly aligned for planting. On the field's edge, tom turkeys circle with full fan tails, recruiting their harems of unimpressed hens. And swift up, barely over the river water's ripples, a swan flies like a speeding white cross into the edge of spring. As we go through life, you will find when you get to be my age, you go through a number of relationships. People leave and others come. But anyway, it's that sort of grinding of gears in between those that are sometimes very awkward. And so this is a song about that. And it's also sort of like, this is like a Greek chorus. There was a play, that Aeschylus, I guess it's 3,000 years old. And there was a chorus of frogs. It was called Frogs. But anyway, this one's called Bullfrogs. Still singing from a concert, we headed out of a rain-soaked city, excited to sleep over and take a plane the next morning from New Jersey for vacation in the Rockies. Her handsome place loomed large from the rain remnant mist. Backlit by spotlights, it fronted a dark lake, splotched with islands of lily pads, hosting choruses of frogs. It was awkward for me to come here, to her former world where she and her husband had raised 3 children. These genial memories were evident everywhere in pictures on tables and desks and bookcases that stole uneasily into my subconscious like a thief. After a drink, we wearied, and while we slept, the bullfrogs serenaded us. Dreams drifted in and out of the mist, mine all too familiar rerun of my late wife squeezing my hand just before her passing. Similarly sudden, my companion's husband had died, ironically at the same age. The rain left with the morning, and the sun gleamed gold off the pond, our being together ratified by those frogs who sang all night for love. Anyway, nature always has something to say about it. This last one is, in Colorado. And sometimes we have to get the distance of alpine mountain passes to see what's going on in the world. And also, this is a poem that is really, it's a Taoist poem. The Taoists believe that, besides ancestor worship, Chinese, that the world is really in balance, and it is we that are out of balance, and that we come together through the way. When we come one with the way, we come into balance with the world. And so that's what this is about. This is called Where the Wind Writes with the Grasses. In the high plains, the wind writes with the grasses, moving them like ocean waves in diverse shades of green. What message is carried from those lofty peaks where silent Buddhas sit, meditating in snow-capped stupas? Bright sun warms stony crags, spiraling invisible thermals both buzzards and eagles ride, while breezes quake the aspen, swaying clumps of sunflowers and blue bunches of lupine. As the planet soaks in the sun, the summer's melt runs off from the steep snowfields, divided up down man's channels to quench the valley through a patchwork of branches, spread over rolling hills to fill a mirrored reservoir that reflects all this grandeur. Down valley, an airship glints silver, taking off the tarmac for cities we escaped, where today it breaks over 100 degrees. Yet all seems in balance in this place. I breathe in deeply the thin mountain air and rejoice being with you here today. Below, an elk herd mingles in the surrounding pasture with the scatter of horses, grazing content in this day. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. It's my real pleasure to introduce our next poet. Jasmine Elizabeth Smith's poems have appeared in Poetry magazine and in World Literature Today, among many other publications. She was a finalist for the 2020 National Poetry Series, and her first book, South Flight, is the winner of the Georgia Poetry Prize, which was founded by Bruce McEver and which Poetry Attack co-sponsors. South Flight is that very thing, a narrative in verse, a book of poems in form of letters between two characters, Jim and Beatrice. There is a melody of vernacular here, which is, to my mind, unparalleled. It uses music to examine the past, to give us the depth and the scope of history of Oklahoma's historical black towns and neighborhoods. It is the book that channels the hosts of the past, bringing back the blues woman and freedman, a book of love and great loss, hope and survival, a book that investigates the mysteries of time and skillfully using poetic devices such as line breaks, images, alliterations, rhymes to stand up in face of destruction. Quote, how I chose hornets into a sonnet, the poet asked, and her answer is always music. Quote, let the sounds I make lamp pitch and light in the ears, she says. Listen to this voice, and Jasmine Elizabeth Smith's poems will give you a sense of place, a sense of enormity of historical crimes, and in the end, her work will show you how a well-told story can lift us up, give solace by being itself, which is to say, being music, despite everything. This is because Jasmine Elizabeth Smith knows how to sing like no one else. South Flight is a terrific book. Please give her your very warm welcome.
Ilya, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. Martín and Bruce, I am so excited to be in conversation and in community with you tonight. And thank you so much for Georgia Tech and the University of Georgia Press for inviting me here tonight. And I'm going to begin, as land is a central component and place as a central component in this narrative of South Flight, I'm going to begin with a land acknowledgement for the 39 tribal nations of Oklahoma. I acknowledge and recognize my responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, including the 39 tribal nations who dwell in the state of Oklahoma, and all of their ancestors, descendants, past, present, and future. South Flight is not only for them, but to my father for leaving, and for my mother for staying, and for the state of Oklahoma, which is both my exile and home. Father's ghost sees Jim Waters off at the Santa Fe Railroad Station. When you finally leave, pack what little you have into a case. Cicadas clocking up your call time. Out east and Cherokee County, twisters spin spools of air. Lowland heifers and prize hogs rub the scent of storms, rising sheet glass tall. Reckon by tomorrow, someone else will be dead. Pocket your grief and trapper blade. You fork dirt clots into scissored wings of flycatchers. Slice your lover's breasts in the root of the Santa Fe ticket line. A woman's blood, be a parable of freedom on this side of the color line. Go on now. Pick yourself. Pick the prairie fire trees. Take the sorghum seeds and the lard crock for your hardness and time. Take her heart. Boy, survival ain't the same as stealing. Correspondence from Boley, Oklahoma to Chicago, Illinois, postmark March 19th, 1922. Jim, we all know the story of Brer Rabbit molasses, an applejack spooned by a capful to cure a whipping cough. Best double layer to keep from catching cold in the wet months. But I claim our ache isn't one old wives' medicine flight or prayers can shake. It rained again last night, and the bottomlands were all a racket. The strike of water forced vibrato on corrugated steel roofs like 100 metal mallet strokes of spoon bellies against the thighs. Hackberry and locust trees broke as if they'd ever stood upright in the first place. You finally flee that chair you claim, or like this weather, there is no break in it. Just keeps on, cast down and cutting as you rush towards that loud and ratty stride of a northern city. Sometimes I want nothing more than a disaster. This mudland due for cleansing in wait of some word, death, or letter, just one letter, Jim. I'd never asked that much from you. And Jim, how all them blackbirds clap wet wings after rain, their necks breaking from beaks bold and fat with water, even after taking flight. Jim, I'm asking. Love letter on the eve of revolution. I am all of wanting. Only the blue seems to make sense these days. To touch you like the parted vowels from heart teeth. I can't breathe. Therefore I am greedy for the passage of air. Clarinets cleared of cold coughs and low-down tonk house songs slapped out of my anger. How can a strangled chord progression, picked in love, sounds like something other than violence? How might I chorus cornets into sonnets when my mouth feels a containment? My tongue is stiffed, an unsoaked reed. I keep trying to play every undigested place of our existence, but my tongue is so dogged out, even my notes flat and cruel. Will I draw or blow love struck? The fermata parting your braids, or head northbound without turning back? Be I beget you what little I still have, my body throaty, a stage pathos at 2 a.m. The trombone spent melodies and riot of beaten drum skins. You know, of honest folks, this world makes sinners and rambling. I know my blues sounds mean, but how can I love upon my bended knees? The next poem, Greenwood Ghost, Dress Their Sunday Best, was inspired by James S. Hurt's Riot in Remembrance, America's Worst Riot and Its Legacy. Pulling from the history and the tradition of resistance of early Black church parades, historian John Hope Franklin, who moved to Greenwood in the 1920s, described the Sunday afternoons in which the residents of his community would promenade the streets in their Sunday best in this way. It was like a pantomime, people moving up and down. They were going in and out of restaurants, and they were just seen to be seen. They were dressed in their finest, and they looked beautiful to me. Greenwood Ghosts dressed their Sunday best after Gwendolyn Brooks, We Real Cool. This is no parade for your pleasure. No one whines a brass bandstand celebration. This no market. We knife, melon, sample, or haggle down our price. Aspirin, lady hand leather of Louise Half Heels, bit o' honey, salted seed from Ferguson's drugstore and Greyer's shoemaker. Up here, no one hunches their backs, lowers their eyes, pantomimes himself a minstrel or maid. We don't give, we grant, stand our own streets, headlining Tulsa Stars, newspapers, Attorney Spears, Sadler, and Chappell. Did you know that we called up Lazarus up from the dead? Bluebonnet Gurney, and Frisell Hospital's basement. Just seen to be seen, we filled out. We bright enough. We gold in weed. We oil reserve. We keep. No time. We runs to shine. Gospel. We holy. Spirit broken from the mouth and matchstick pews of Bethel Adventist Church. Past Abner and Hunter barbershop, Carter billboards, party furnished rooms, Dixie theaters. Y'all mistook our procession for ghost. Envious, the figurative, you claimed we isn't. So why did you stop and stare? Is our beauty so vain it is a form of resistance? Jim imagines a drink with lead belly after the lynching of Lloyd Clay. My husband was a hardworking man, killed a mile and a half from here. His head was found in a driving wheel, and his body has never been found in the Pines, traditional American folk song. Take a seat, boy. Drink that you might hear me. Songs, all stories. And what story it is depends on who's in the room to hear it. You see, some men might stir their fingers a little bit, lighten themselves with 2 dimes from their wallet or water a deep weekend deal. And girls might loosen hands to shorten up their skirt hems, tap a patent toe to tile. Yeah, they might even feel wild, a calico string plucked foreign and bucking in their bellies. I isn't saying they're wrong, but them folks are always kind of offbeat to all kind of holler. My black girl never slept in no pine. If the cruel needling of white folks keep her colds, when I say it, my girl never danced nicely to the song. And when I say her husband was killed, I mean lynched.
Thousands of men could not see that boy go on with his kind of goodness. And when I say his body was never found, I mean he gotten rid of in the worst of ways. No wet roll lodged in river mouth, nor he hung from a tree. A treaty flag his girl might washboard in widowing. He very well might been soaked in coal oil, disowned by his people, his girl, a song. Isn't a trace left in this bridge of Southern blues. He's been all swallowed up. Bodies seen at disposal sites and lack of carnations. After computations as to the deaths from the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre by Richard Dick Warner. In Newburgh, Park City incinerator on East and West Ends. Buried in Booker T. Washington, Rose Hill, Oaklawn, and Black Perryman cemeteries. Somewhere in Jinx, tossed in a river and buried in a sandbar. Under the railroad bridge over the Arkansas River. In Standpipe Hill, Reservoir Hill, North Cincinnati Hill, Mohawk and Chandler Park areas. On the 11th Street Bridge burned. On the Katy Railroad tracks burned as well. Hidden in the Brady Theater basement. On the East 36 and South Peoria. Between South Peoria and Riverside Drive on 41st Street, between East 31st and East 41st Street and South Lewis. Entombed in mines, on the northwest corner of East 21st Street, on the northeast corner of East 21st Street and South Yale, on the southwest corner of East 21st Street and South Harvard, and along East Apache. Placed under railroad tracks and fairgrounds under the Reserve Building on East 15th Street in a hole tossed in other mines, the ones in West Tulsa, south in Collinsville between Catoosa and Claremore. Bodies seen passing Onetta and Katy Railroad train and along the tracks in Oakland Cemetery. Disposed on the pier west of Tulsa and on West 3rd. Rumors of mass graves near Crystal City in Red Fork, between Tulsa and Sand Springs, and the hot clover and wild irises, all are disposed in mass graves of non-histories. Beatrice visits. Do not grieve, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10, postmarked September 8, 1922. Tell myself, time and time again, Beatrice, there's always so much to be put up around here. Thickening a bone, rinsed dish. Ringworms of grease itch my supper spoons. Even my bedroom floors rash with dirt, and some days I barely got the strength to move this mess or dress myself for church. These days, grief has become a location chewing at mud and current, the upper acre red rivers streamliners hunger for. My scrap rug, comfortable before its cook stove and all of the South. How these days come to complain. How I care little for the concerns of others. What the front page says, mothers clawing black hats and dress fronts, mute in streets. And what boy is vested in barbed wire and lack of his coffin lifted upstream? Frankly said, I'm just unconcerned with using loss as a tool, tired of planting, just plain tired of clearing a path for folks. Have you ever felt the satisfaction of not tending to, withholding to lick your own welts with milkweed and kerosene? Sunday and the preacher man preach. As with folks, it's all about what they take, the pass of an offering plate, and how much I am willing to give. Beatrice, why don't you light a paraffin prayer for all them poor souls? You are blessed among women. I'm hoarding the tithe of my pennies until I'm poor. I swallow the communion of wax, all rubbed. I, an outed candlewick. So, this will be my last one. I'll end on something happy. I feel like I should end on a slightly more optimistic note. So I'm going to read B's extension to B. Postmark, November 23rd, 1922. A cold come off of the Canadian River, and even be sicken on December, driving my feet back into wool. Between the teeth of floorboards and Weibel milk bottles waiting porch, bees collect like bullet casings, knowing this home of mine a dying place. For days in a row they lose their way in cotton patch and fence beans. And ain't a single compass left among them. Bees that hail up my windows, running my rooftop, stalks of coins split at the seams. Jim, a woman of little waist might hold the beads of dead bees into decoration to wear in the yard, bed, while setting something to boil. She to hope she might become something of flight, finding the broken beautiful. In her best heirloom, drink the insect wings hand-picked with thumbs of bottom land water. She to believe that something that is placed in the mouth makes it true. Hope, a man's ring finger, even a myth. Ages ago, my folks believe women like me could climb air as stair, and even when slaves, the briar and saw-tooth Wichitas to sky, my people could fly. I suppose I believe in this to believe a BB I will become. Thank you so much.
Thank you so, so much. It is a powerful, memorable reading. Thank you. And thank you for your poems.
Thank you.
Well, as many here tonight would certainly agree with me, our final reader, Martín Espada, is one of America's greatest living poets. He is the author of more than 20 books, most recently features Floaters, the winner of the National Book Award in Poetry, and also of the prestigious Ruth Lilly Prize given by Poetry Foundation, among many other honors. But let me share with you a somewhat more personal perspective. When I came to the United States from Ukraine all the way back in 1990s, I was surprised by a kind of, let's call it a passive attitude about poetry. Poetry makes nothing happen as something that people seem to quote, or rather misquote WHO back in the 90s. So I'm sharing that to explain my excitement all this time ago at finding the work of a poet such as Martín Espada. And I will quote a few lines from his interview to explain this excitement. Quote from Martín Espada's interview. As poets, we accept too passively, I think, our diminished place in the shadows of society, Espada says. We truly have the power to, he says, to change hearts and minds. I have witnessed it in many scenarios what poetry can do, he says. This is why I love to bring poetry to places where it doesn't typically belong. A prison, a halfway house, a rehab center, a boxing gym, or, in one case, a tortilla factory. When I bring poetry to these places, Martín Espada says, and see the response, the power of poetry is so apparent. To this, I personally will add that the power of poetry is especially apparent if one's gift is as huge as Martín Espada's. Yes, there is incredible force and passion, the trust in the art in his work. Quote, I will chant this poem repeatedly till the sun rises or until the police club me with a flashlight. But friends, this is not just his passion, but his craft, his word choice, his image making, which is always fresh and alive, which is to say, he doesn't just bring poetry into the larger world, but he has a mastery of craft that enables him to bring the larger world into poetry. As you will listen to him read, pay attention how memorably his images enter his sentence, how his line breaks turn his sentences to rhythm. Pay attention also to how skillful is the use of repetition. He creates a sense of incantation, makes a text into a spell. But above all, it is impossible not to notice the large heart in Espada's poems. He writes, quote, how the world love buzzes in a sonnet after sonnet. I am the beekeeper who wakes from the nightmare of the beehives. Pay attention, friends, when you listen to him. How musical patterns investigate the rhythms of human predicament and time. Our survival, quote, my father saw stars, my son sees stars. The earth rolls beneath our feet. We lurch ahead. One day we have walked this far. In the end, Martín Espada's poems always remind us of the power of paying attention to the planet and to our neighbors. And more than that, our responsibility to the planet and to our neighbors. He makes his message memorable through tone and imagery and music. Quote, now bells chime like the maskell beating in every chest. Hear the cracks in the bell, every face listening to the bells. Friends, this is what greatness in poetry can do. Despite so much misfortune, we can see around us a human voice isn't afraid to sing back to this misfortune, to imagine the walls can be broken with a song. Because, quite frankly, silence is not acceptable. Please give Martín Espada your very warm welcome.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Many thanks to Ilya Kaminsky for that brilliant introduction. Thanks to Travis Denton from Poetry Attack. Thanks to the poets, Bruce McEver and Jasmine Elizabeth Smith. Congratulations again, Jasmine, on winning the Georgia Poetry Prize. I will read 4 poems from Floaters. I'm going to begin with the title poem, Two Salvadoran migrants, father and daughter, who came to be known as Oscar and Valeria, drowned crossing the Rio Grande in June of 2019. A photograph of their bodies went viral, sparking outrage, sparking grief, and also sparking denial. There was a post in the I'm 1015 Border Patrol Facebook group charging that the photograph was a fake. This poem speaks to that photograph and these charges. Floaters takes its title from the term used by certain members of the Border Patrol to describe those who drown crossing over. And so we'll begin here. Floaters. Epigraph. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and ask, have y'all ever seen floaters this clean? I'm not trying to be an ass, but I have never seen floaters like this. Could this be another edited photo? We've all seen the Dems and liberal parties do some pretty sick things. Anonymous post. I'm 1015 Border Patrol Facebook group. Like a beer bottle thrown into the river by a boy too drunk to cry. Like the shard of a styrofoam cup drained of coffee, brown as the river. Like the plank of a fishing boat broken in half by the river, the dead float. And the dead have a name. Floaters, say the men of the Border Patrol, keeping watch all night by the river, hearts pumping coffee as they say the word floaters, soft as a bubble, hard as a shoe as it nudges the body to see if it breathes, see if it moans, to see if it sits up and speaks. And the dead have names. A feast day parade of names, names that dress all in red, names that twirl skirts, names that blow whistles, names that shake rattles, names that sing in praise of the saints. Say, Oscar Alberto Martinez Ramirez. Say, Angie Valeria Martinez Avalos. See how they rise off the tongue, the calling of bird to bird somewhere in the trees above our heads, trilling in the dark heart of the leaves. Say what we know of them now they are dead. Oscar slept dough for pizza with oven-blistered fingers. Daughter Valeria sang, banging a toy guitar. He slipped free of the apron he wore in the blast of the oven, stole the motorcycle he would kick till it sputtered to life, counted off pesos for the journey across the river, and the last of his 25 years, and the last of her 23 months. There is another name that beats its wings in the heart of the trees. Say, Tanya Vanessa Avalos, Oscar's wife and Valeria's mother, the witness stumbling along the river. Now their names rise off her tongue. Say, Oscar y Valeria. He swam from Matamoros across to Brownsville, the girl slung around his neck, stood her in the weeds on the Texas side of the river, swore to return with her mother in hand, turning his back as fathers do, who later say, I turned around and she was gone. In the time it takes for a bird to hop from branch to branch, Valeria jumped in the river after her father. Maybe he called out her name as he swept her up from the river. Maybe the river drowned out his voice as the water swept them away. Tanya called out the names of the saints, but the saints drowsed in the stupor of birds in the dark, their cages covered with blankets. The men on patrol would never hear their pleas for asylum, watching for floaters, hearts pumping coffee all night on the Texas side of the river. No one, they say, had ever seen floaters this clean. Oscar's black shirt yanked up to the armpits, Valeria's arms slung around her father's neck, even after the light left her eyes, both face down in the weeds back on the Mexican side of the river. Another edited photo. See how her head disappears in his shirt, the waterlogged diaper bunched in her pants, the blue of the blue cans. The radio warned us about the crisis actors we see at one school shooting after another. The man called Oscar will breathe, sit up, speak, tug the black shirt over his head, shower off the mud, and shake hands with the photographer. Yet the floaters did not float down the Rio Grande like Olympians showing off the backstroke, nor did their souls float up to Dallas, land of rumored jobs and a president shot in the head as he waved from his motorcade. No bubbles rose from their breath in the mud, light as the iridescent circles of soap that would fascinate a 2-year-old. And the dead still have names, names that sing in praise of the saints, names that flower in blossoms of white, a cortege of names dressed all in black, trailing the coffins to the cemetery. Carve their names in headlines and gravestones they would never know in the kitchens of this cacophonous world. Enter their names in the book of names. Say, Oscar Alberto Martinez Ramirez. Say, Angie Valeria Martinez Avalos. Bury them in a corner of the cemetery named for the sainted Archbishop of the poor, shot in the heart saying mass, bullets bought by the taxes I paid when I worked as a bouncer and fractured my hand 40 years ago, and bumper stickers read, El Salvador is Spanish for Vietnam. When the last bubble of breath escapes the body, may the men who speak of floaters, who have never seen floaters this clean, float through the clouds to the heavens, where they paddle the air as they wait for the saint who flips through the keys on his ring like a drowsy janitor, till he fingers the key that turns the lock and shuts the gate on their babble-tongued faces, and they plunge back to earth, a shower of hailstones pelting the river, the Mexican side of the river. I do believe that times of hate call for poems of love. So here we go. My wife, Lauren, is a poet, a novelist, and a dedicated high school humanities teacher. We were married June the 13th, 2019 by a justice of the peace in our living room. Here's the sonnet I read at the ceremony. It's called Love is a Luminous Insect at the Window for Lauren Maria Espada, June 13th, 2019. The word love, there it is again, indestructible as an insect, fly faster than a swatter, mosquito darting through the net. How the word love chirps in every song, crickets keeping a city boy up all night. I wish I could fry and eat them. How the word love buzzes in sonnet after sonnet. I am the beekeeper who wakes from a nightmare of beehives. To quote Duran, the Panamanian brawler who waved a glove and walked away in the middle of a fight, no más, no more. Then I see you watching the violinist, his eyes shut, the Russian composer's concerto in his head, white horse hair fraying on the bow, and your face is bright with tears. And there it is again, the word love. Not a fly or a mosquito, not a cricket or a bee, but the Luna moth we saw one night, luminous green wings knocking at the screen on the window as if to say, I have a week to live, let me in. And I do. My father died 8 years ago yesterday. He was a community organizer. He was a documentary photographer. It's an early morning in 1968. Death rides the elevator in Brooklyn. On a winter morning in 1968, my father left to walk the picket line. He rode the elevator in his black coat, hood over his head, in the hour before daybreak. On the third floor, the doors opened. A white man waiting for the elevator stood there, peered at my father in his black coat and hood, in his brown skin, then screamed and fled. The doors closed. My father laughed on the picket line that morning. He laughed for years. The guy thought I was death, he would say. Death rides an elevator in Brooklyn. Mugger death, militant death, Puerto Rican death. Listening to the story, as the screaming man screamed louder with every telling, I never thought one day my father would be the man standing there waiting for the elevator doors to open. He did not stare or scream or run. He stepped into the elevator and the doors closed behind him. Yeah, my last poem. My father, Francisco Luis Espada, Frank Espada, was born in the mountain town of Utuado, Puerto Rico in 1930 and died in Pacifica, California in 2014. When Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, I suddenly saw Utuado everywhere, on television, on the internet, headlines. As John Lee Anderson put it in the pages of the New Yorker, Utuado, quote, had become a byword for the island's devastation. More than 4,000 people died. I started talking to my father, who died 3 years before. Actually, I started talking to his ashes in a box on my bookshelf, and that was the genesis of this last poem. Letter to my father, October 2017. You once said, my reward for this life will be 1,000 pounds of dirt shoveled in my face. You were wrong. You are 7 pounds of ashes in a box, a Puerto Rican flag wrapped around you next to a red brick from the house in Utuado where you were born, all crammed together on my bookshelf. You taught me there is no God, no life after this life, so I know you're not watching me type this letter over my shoulder. When I was a boy, you were God. I watched from the 7th floor of the projects as you walked down into the street to stop a public execution. A big man caught a small man stealing his car, and everyone in Brooklyn heard the car alarm wail of the condemned. He's killing me. At a word from you, the executioner's hand slipped from the hair of the thief. The kid was high, was all you said when you came back to us. When I was a boy, and you were God, we flew to Puerto Rico. You said, my grandfather was the mayor of Utuado. His name was Buenaventura. That means good fortune. I believed in your grandfather's name. I heard the tree frogs chanting to each other all night. I saw banana leaf and elephant palm sprouting from the mountain's belly. I gnawed the mango's pit, and the sweet yellow hair stuck between my teeth. I said to you, you came from another planet. How'd you do it? You said, every morning, just before I woke up, I saw the mountains. Every morning, I see the mountains. En Utuado, 3 sisters, all in their 70s, all bedridden, all Pentecostales who only left the house for church, lay sleeping on mattresses spread across the floor when the hurricane gutted the mountain the way a butcher slices open a dangled pig, and a rolling wall of mud buried them, leaving the 4th sister to stagger into the street, screaming like an unheeded prophet about the end of the world. En Utuado, a man who cultivated a garden of aguacate and carambola, feeding the avocado and star fruit to his nieces from New York, so the trees in his garden be headed all at once like the soldiers of a beaten army, and so hanged himself. En Utuado, a welder and a handyman rigged a pulley with a shopping cart to ferry rice and beans across the river where the bridge collapsed, witnessed the cart swaying above so many hands that raised a sign that told the helicopters, Campamento los Olvidados, Camp of the Forgotten. Los Olvidados wait 7 hours in line for a government meal of Skittles and Vienna sausage, or a tarp to cover the bones of a house with no roof as the fungus grows on their skin from sleeping on mattresses drenched with the spit of the hurricane. They drink the brown water waiting for microscopic monsters in their bellies to visit plagues upon them. A nurse says, these people are going to have an epidemic. These people are going to die. The president flips rolls of paper towels to a crowd at a church in Guaynabo, Zeus lobbing thunderbolts on the locked ward of his delusions. Down the block, cousin Ricardo, Bernice's boy, says that somebody stole his can of diesel. I heard somebody ask you once what Puerto Rico needed to be free, and you said, 3 pulgadas de sangre en la calle. 3 inches of blood in the street. Now 3 inches of mud flow through the streets of Utuado, and troops patrol the town as if guarding the vein of copper in the ground, as if a shovel digging graves in the backyard might strike the ore below, as if La Brigada swinging machetes to clear the road might remember the last uprising. I know you are not God. I have the proof. 7 pounds of ashes in a box on my bookshelf. Gods do not die, and yet I want you to be God again. Stride from the crowd to seize the president's arm before another roll of paper towels sails away. Thunder Spanish obscenities in his face. Banish him to a roofless rainstorm in Utuado so he unravels one soaked sheet after another till there is nothing left but his cardboard heart. I promised myself I would stop talking to you, white box of gray grit. You were deaf even before you died. Hear my promise now. I will take you to the mountains where houses lost like ships at sea rise, blue and yellow from the mud. I will open my hands. I will scatter your ashes. En Utuado. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Wow. Wow. Just a quick note to our audience, wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening from. If you did not feel something during the reading tonight, please take your pulse. Please take your pulse. How wonderful, everyone. Let's end with gratitude. The way we began, let's end with gratitude. Special thanks to our poets, Bruce McEver, Jasmine Elizabeth Smith, Martín Espada. Oh, what an amazing reading tonight. I know we're all inspired and just blown away. Thanks for your generosity. So thank you, everyone. This, readings like this, they don't just happen, but it takes a team, right, Ilya? I mean, we've got our poetry squad. We've got our group, and we owe a debt of thanks to Skanda Prasad. That's Poetry at Tech Wizard. We couldn't do it without you, Skanda. Thanks so much for pushing the buttons and working the technical wizardry that you do each time. Thanks to University of Georgia Press and Beth Sneed and Lisa Bayer. Happy to be partnered with you folks and looking forward to bringing many more wonderful books into the world. However, I have to say, Jasmine's book, we set the bar really high, guys. Jasmine, congratulations. Just stunning. I want to thank our dean, Ilya, as well, our dean of Ivan Allen College, Dean K. Husbands Feeling, for ongoing support of the arts at Ivan Allen College and the School of Literature, Media, and Communication. Thanks so much. We couldn't do it without you, and we're happy to keep doing it. So, thanks. Thanks to our winner of the Thomas Lakes Poetry Award, Cambria, Caliendo. Congratulations to you once again. And I want to thank all of you, our wonderful attendees at these Poetry at Tech events. We do this for you. So thank you for joining. Thanks for listening in. And thanks for your love of poetry and your belief in community building through the arts, because that's what we want to do. Now, here's what's coming up at Poetry at Tech. On April 14th, we have Daniel Borzutsky, Natalie Handel, and Charles Simic, an evening of poetry with those three folks. It's going to be a great night. Before that, we have free community poetry workshops, one with Charles Simic on Saturday, March 19th, and one with Jenny Z. That's on Sunday, April 3rd. For more information about those two free community workshops and to register, go to poetry.gatech.edu, and you'll be all set. But thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks for coming, and be safe wherever you are.
Thank you, Travis.
Hey, thank you, Bruce.